Yes, minute précision.
OK. Les cheveux sont-ils beaux?
Les miens sont plus partout plaisir.
On est prêt? Good evening, everybody. Hi, this is René Graton of TVC22, and I'm with...
I'm Linda Pilon. I'm the treasurer on the board of directors.
And tonight we're happy to have you for our Living Lab project that we're going to tell you all about. So, you know, the agenda, this was going to be a group discussion. Unfortunately, TVC22 seems to have a bit of a jinx that every time that we do an event or a get-together, we have a storm.
Yes,
so,
Mother Nature doesn't cooperate.
Yes, so hopefully we have some people online, and we do have someone watching, so if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to bring those to us. And it's going to be an informal presentation, you know, quite high level, but this is a big project. So we're not going to get into the details. We don't want to give you information overload because we're all about managing information. So we're going to, but the one thing we are going to do is speak of the 5 W's, you know, the why and how and what and when and where and all of that stuff. So hopefully at the end of the presentation you have a really good idea. And then start with why. So, you know, why we do it. Now, the reason a group might want to join the TVC22 and its Living Lab initiative might be different for every group, but I think it's important for you to understand why TVC22 is doing this initiative. It's not part of our regular mandate, because our regular mandate is TV production, journalism, but this is a big initiative which we feel is going to benefit the community, and we're using our platform, our information communication platform, so everything is aligned with our vision and mission. And you know, quite simply, at the very core, what we do or what we want to do at TVC22 and how we, you know, envision ourselves is, you know, the organization that you go to for information, you know, to communicate and educate communities widely. And we say widely because, you know, certainly regionally we've expanded. We don't just cover Clarence, Rockland, far from. You know, we cover, you know, Prescott Russell in its entirety. And, you know, we go to Ottawa, we go to Gatineau, you know, we have partners in the St. Lawrence and Cornwall. And our vision is, you know, the physical vision is that we'll be able to cover Eastern Ontario physically. But today with the digital platforms, there is no boundaries.
No.
So we're, and everything's aligned with our mission, which we revised last year, I guess. We revised our mission statement, and it was reinforced with our eco-responsible certification. So our why at the end of the day, we feel that the Living Lab is a really, really important initiative, is that it's going to help us to strengthen our regional communities' links. It's going to help us foster the value of diversity, equality, inclusivity in our multimedia programming and services towards sustainable development. And note that we don't say television much anymore.
No, that's true. It is in our logo, but we do more than just TV.
Yeah, that's right. It is in our logo, but we actually, you know, it's more of a physical studio and a virtual studio, because we do more and more are virtually. So that's our why. And also in terms of the eco-responsible certification, it's about sustainable development. But from the very core, I mean, TVC22 since 2022, oddly enough, we've been really, framing our programming around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which right now is currently under the 2030 agenda, but every time that a new agenda is developed, it evolves, so I think originally it just had 7 or 8 goals, and now it's at 17 goals. So I've highlighted here the ones that we focus, but they're always very, very interlinked. One can't be without the other. They are
They don't work in silos.
No, not at all. So the first one is quality education. I think, yes, that one here. And I mean, I can't imagine doing information and communication without communication and information without education, without good education.
Exactly.
We've done a lot of program on health and wellness, and our health and wellness is education. They're educational programs.
Yeah, and then it's limitless. There's so many topics to discuss.
Yeah, exactly, and climate change, and so you can't do sustainable development without quality education. The other ones that we've set for ourselves as a priority is decent jobs and economic growth. That is not just for us, but it's community growth. It's, how can we use the platform to help your businesses? You have a small business, and all of the businesses that.
And there's so much duplication of work that each business or organization does. How could we collaborate together to eliminate all that time and effort doing individual documents when they can be, used as a template for all?
Yeah, and that was part of the discussion we were having earlier with the French presentation, where we're saying, especially with nonprofit organizations where you're so limited in resources. So if we can share, tools and strategies to grow economically as well as create better jobs.
That's right. Many of the volunteers that do these documents are professionals by nature.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
They're worthwhile sharing.
Yeah, for sure. Then the Sustainable Development Goal 11 is all about sustainable cities and communities. Across the region, we're between 2 metropolitans. We're between the metropolitan of Ottawa and Montreal to the east, but we have our own little cities that are growing fast.
Oh yes.
Because of the location, and if those aren't sustainable, if the systems aren't sustainable, but and part of the focus for us on that is the protecting of the culture of the communities and in these regions, obviously very bilingual.
Very much so.
I speak Franglish, and it's also very francophone in a minority province or French in Ontario. Then sustainable consumption and production patterns. Trying to be more responsible in what we consume as well as what we dispose of. We're working really, really hard on reducing our digital carbon footprint.
Yes.
And
yes, we are. There's so many opportunities to.
Yeah, and the recycling weekend.
The recycling weekend's coming up in April. Yeah. People getting the word out there. There's a lot of people that get rid of their
I did a little
electronics responsibly.
I did a little chat GPT search of what we collected over 6,000 tons of e-waste in the last 3 years, and it would be equal to a school bus. Like if you imagine the city school bus that is just full of e-waste, and so we want that to keep we want to keep building on that.
Yeah, and we're expanding too, so hopefully that'll be a lot more.
Yeah,
This
for
year.
sure. So, and then the last but not least is partnership. You know, you can't, just kind of like education, you can't achieve sustainable development without good partners. And so partnerships for the goals is really, really important. So those are our priorities. But as we said, they're very interlinked with all of the others. And, you know, so what we hope people will tell us is what are they working on, you know. The other thing too is that why we feel this is a good approach is the OECD, the Organization for Economic Collaborative Development, has set some principles on rural policy. And you know, when you have really good principles and you live by your principles, and we are in a rural area, you know, that definitely between those two metropolitans, you know, we're rural, but we're growing very fast. So, you know, having a principle-based approach is also, you know, definitely a guiding principles. So a lot of I'm not going to stop and delay on this one, but you know, so much of our programming content matters because it's educational towards all of these aspects and so much more.
Yeah.
So in terms of what? Well, what is a living lab? A living lab's, you know, the largest living lab group, or it's not an organization, but it's a collaboration, because that's what living labs are, is the European Network of Living Lab. And the largest group that exists is ENOL, and their definition I really like. It's our living labs are open, user-centered innovation ecosystems based on a systemic co-creation approach, integrating research and innovation processes in real communities and environments. So, you know, for us, the projects that we are doing under the Living Lab, they are very, very much, you know, in real life context. Mm-hmm. We work so much with youth who are experiencing, you know, for the first time working in a nonprofit, or a student, you know, doing its co-op and, you know, coming because they like the video, but, you know, all of a sudden they discover new things that, you know, so we're experiencing here in the studio all the time. We're experiencing with new approaches, we're experiencing with new media, like we now have a podcast studio, which we didn't have before. We're even experiencing now with writing, which, you know, is definitely new. So when I say multimedia, I mean multimedia.
That's right.
Yeah, so we talked about the partnerships, that's critical. You know, some people will be familiar, especially those working in governments, will be familiar with the model of P3, public-private partnerships. But in terms of the living labs, they really depend on a fourth P, which is people. You know, so public-private people partnerships. So the civic groups are very important. We're seeing it also in our board. Our board is growing, you know, and the nonprofits, we're working with the people we're working with.
Exactly, and it's important that we all work together to find out what we have in common and how we can help each other out, and not just do everything in silos.
Yeah, and you were saying also how it's just blowing our mind how all of a sudden we have people walking in the door and saying we want to do a series on this and a series on that.
Which is awesome.
I know.
I mean, the more volunteers, the better.
Yeah.
And you know, that's for us, but it's also for the other organizations out there. And we do have quite qualified volunteers, and
amazing.
Why not share the wealth?
And I'm still blown away. It's been several months now, but I've got to name him, Stephen Bilodeau, you know, who is a veteran, retired, now does comedy to try and humanize the veterans. But Stephen has the Soundcheck podcast where he has discussions with veterans, and like he has some really, he opens the door for veterans or emergency. It's not just veterans actually, it's first responders as well. So it's really the people part of things is really important. It's also because so many times you do with a really large project and you don't involve the people, and then the project is done, and then you have opposition groups that you know start raising obstacles, and you know.
When you work together, there's less of that. You know, that
conflict.
those issues, that conflict. Exactly.
So the three elements that we're going to do is we're going to create an information communication technology and education services and platform. We have to use a multi-level governance because it's not just internal governance. We're working with, when the minute you're in the media, you have a responsibility to work with all levels of governance, governments as well, to inform the people so that they can make good decisions. And God knows we've had enough elections and now we're heading for more. And then the regional policy framework as well. So this is, you know, I was talking earlier about the rural policies, you know, so how do we, and then, you know, the kind of information that we're trying to pull together or resources, you know, it's territorial. It's not just Clarence, Rockland, it's really regional.
I think it's a collaborative we
Yeah.
when you're speaking. It's not just we as in TVC
Yeah.
they do. It's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's bigger. It's
Yeah.
not just our thing. It's for the community.
Yeah, and before I used to say, you know, we were local and thinking of Prescott Russell as being local, but then, you know, now we have partners in Onalaschwe in Cornwall, and we're doing projects in Gatineau, so really more territorial is what it's becoming.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, like with social media, there's no limit.
No, for sure.
So what?
Yeah, we have people watching from, you know, subscribed from France, and you know, that's kind of nice, you know. And that tells us that we're doing good content in French. There's a lot in English, not enough in French, you know. So in terms of characteristics, this is really important, you know, in terms of the characteristics, you know. It's not a one method linear approach. It's really, you know, all kinds of methods, you know. It could be, you know, a turnkey approach. It could be a, you know, doing a morsel, but you know, it's not, there's nothing cast in stone. It's a lab because we want to experience different things, you
and
know?
it's living because it's constantly changing.
Yes, absolutely. What's key is user engagement, you know, so we're able to save people a lot of money on their projects based on the condition that they put some skin in the game. You know, so they have to engage actively, they have to participate in the process, and when they do, what comes of it is really extraordinary. You know, I'm mindful of the leadership féminin Prescott Russell and our first podcasts and how we were able to fine tune so much because they were really engaged in working with us to make it a good process and a really good experience for everybody, and deliver a quality product for them that they can be proud of. But it was also our first impression out there.
That's
So
right.
what did people think of us, you know? And then real life setting, we already talked about in terms of co-creation. It has to be, the living lab for it to work has to be co-created. So we're not coming to the people with a, you know, an order book.
No.
You know, we want people to co-create this thing with us, you know. And, you know, benefits, well, there's so many of them, but I'll just sort of highlight, you know, knowledge dissemination or information dissemination. networking, exchanges with stakeholders, innovation support, technology support, reinforce growth capacity, improve risk management, support interdependencies. You know, so I don't know if you could stop me
No,
or if you think
it's
of
all
anything
good.
else.
It's what comes to mind too is more of the simple stuff, like a calendar of events and not shooting ourselves in the foot because there's 3 other events happening that same day.
Yeah.
It's all that collaboration together.
Yes.
And even volunteers.
Or competitive events in the sense that, you know, we're doing one and then somebody else is doing it and didn't, instead of calling us and saying, how about we do it together?
Exactly.
You know, where we, anyways, but that's a, you know, sort of a, well, those are the things we want to address.
Yeah.
You know, it's a thorn in our sides, so let's take the thorn out. So,
Yeah.
I want to, this is a good little slide because it shows the difference. You know, some people might have experienced a hub, a business hub, a co-working space, or a corporate research and development lab, or an innovation lab. Well, what's the difference? Well, the sweet spot with a living lab is that it sits right on the line with, you know, between social benefit and economic benefit, because let's face it, unfortunately, you know, we're still, you know, all having to depend on economics. You know, so it's that sweet spot. But one thing is that it goes far more, it focuses more on organizational goals than individual goals.
That's
you
right.
know, so it's not the goal of Linda, who happens to be a director, a treasurer, but also happens to have a small business with her husband. You know, you know, the Living Lab is going to help the community that you're within, but and hopefully by osmosis, it will help Linda and it will help the business and so on. But it's focused on organizational goals far more than it's not, you know, one person that guides it, you know. So
Yeah.
that's very different from the hubs and the co-working spaces, and it's also very different than the corporate and research development labs, because those are definitely economic driven, whereas innovation lab are social driven, you know. So it's that sort of that sweet spot that we're trying to hit.
Yeah, and it's not like we make the decisions and then the people do the work.
No.
It's everybody together making a decision that benefits
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah, for sure. Now, who now sound like an owl. Who are the actors? Well, there's, if you recall, I said it about, you know, public, private, people partnerships, you know, the 4 Ps. So there are the private actors, they're the people that bring the practical know-how, you know, and resources, the businesses, the technology businesses that we work with, or experts that we turn to for, you know,
Specific
specific
laws.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's the knowledge institutes, the research and development. Like right now, we started some project with La Cité Collégiale, and as a matter of fact, we also did our eco-responsible certification.
That's right.
Thanks to La Cité, you know, La Cité des Affaires, you know, so the knowledge institutes, the expertise in the scientific substantiation. That was a fun word. The public actors that bring long-term perspective and regulatory role. Hopefully our government will get will be more active in the social media rules and regulations, but we're still having to work and address that aspect. But then the people side of things, those are the users. Those are the everyday people. They're the everyday students that come and work with us. They're the, you know, the volunteers. They're the nonprofit groups that tell us what is needed out there.
And
you know.
these guys are as important,
Oh
if
my
not
God.
more important than the other one.
Yes, because they prevent, and one of the criticism with the old P3 models is that it doesn't engage people, and then people feel left out and nobody likes that, and then you get into the conflicts, and also the design isn't done understanding the people because they were
Exactly.
not part of the process.
Exactly.
So that's a huge difference, you know, having that forth the users from beginning to operations, you know.
Yeah, because they're the ones that are going to use more the platform. So who better to tell us what we need, what we
Yeah,
don't need?
exactly, because, you know, we have an idea, we have a concept, but we need to develop it and work with the community to do that if we want to be a good multimedia. So at the end of the day, all of this is about enabling communities to really innovate together. You know, as to the when, well, in my brain, it's been a really, really long time, but in the TVC22 context, we started being really, we started talking about it in 2023. It was the first time that I brought it up. But then we really started working on it in 2024 to, you know, explore it, you know, decide whether or not, you know, a lot of questions. But in 2025, in December, we officially launched it, which was really exciting. It was a bad storm day, but we also had a lot of, but we had a lot of people, and it was really exciting how people engaged
That's right.
on that. So now we're in 2026. And we are now in the process of validating this. So we're doing this, you know, sort of information session, but we want to take this on the road and make it workshops and make it really engaging so that people can participate in the process. It's a big, ambitious project. So we made it part of our 2025 to 2030 strategy. And we're going to walk before we run, and we're going to take small bites before we take big bites. And
Well, if we truly
You know.
want to know and listen to what people have to say, we can't go super fast anyhow.
no,
So
exactly. So that's, you know, sort of the strategy. And the reason this is, I'm sorry, this is the French slide that's appearing, but at the bottom is the English anyway. So.
we're bilingual.
Yeah, I told you, we're, you know, Franglish country, you know. So we've gone past the ideation, the concept, and I should say that this is not a new idea. In many groups in Europe, there's over 400 living labs across Europe. And in Canada and the US, there are more in the universities and research institutions, but there's a lot of groups out there, and quite frankly, we're one of them, that are living labs. They just call themselves a task group.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there, like, there's probably more out there.
They call,
that are
you know,
not...
their local action group, their councils, their, you know, I was involved in, my first experience with a living lab, which was actually MIT, but my first experience was while I was a director at the Canada Green Building Council. And so, and that's many years now. But, you know, the council itself, you know, could be thought of as a living lab because, you know.
And who knows,
yeah.
maybe, you know, the people who are on the executive committee may change the name, right? Who
Yeah,
knows?
no,
It's
absolutely.
It's not cast in stone.
Not cast in stone at all, absolutely. And so now we've done our visioning and our founders fit. We, you know, and this is really important. You know, we fit this to fit TVC22, but the larger community at large, because this is not a mandate. TVC22 is not mandated to do the Living Lab. We're mandated to do local journalism news. We're mandated to do TV programming, and our sponsors for this, and we thank them, is Heritage Canada and for the news programming with now under the administration of the consortium, media consortium. We work with Videotron. We're mandated to do, you know, work with them, but the Living Lab is an initiative. We're not obligated to do this, okay? And it's not operational, and I say this because sometimes, grant applications, it seems to be, one of the places where people get stuck, kind of thing, saying, why are you doing this? Well, we're doing this because it makes sense for us, but we know it makes sense for the community.
Yeah. And speaking of grant applications, nothing's preventing these organizations coming together and applying for a grant. Lord knows it takes a long time to answer all those questions. So why not work together?
Yes.
And two or more organizations benefit from the money.
Yeah, it's sort of like, half a pie or a slice of a pie is better than no pie at all.
Yeah, exactly.
You can tell I have a sweet tooth. So, now where we are right now is number one, okay? So we're at the lean startup, and the lean strategies are about optimizing resources while eliminating process waste, So we made the commitment in December 2025. We launched it officially. And the board has endorsed the initiative, still many questions, but, taking a big risk, because it's a big initiative. But now we're at the stage where we want to develop this product/service to the market and our market, so we're at the validation stage. And what we're going to discover in the next few years, in the next few months, the next few years, is, are we going to scale this up? Are we going to say, at one point we're going to say, that was just, it was a good intent, it just wasn't working. And that happens, sometimes you're ahead of the curve. You're ahead of your time.
For specific approaches that
sometimes, and I've heard this before with some great innovations, you're just too far, you're too early, So we want to be on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. So, and then, as we go, we're going to scale up or grow and hopefully grow and expand,
And you know what? Don't be afraid to ask questions, because I'm on the board. I hear about the Living Lab a lot, but I don't necessarily understand it completely yet. I'm a visual person, so it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah.
And Denise's very knowledgeable of the subject and how it all works.
Yeah.
But it's hard to be inside her head sometimes.
But it's also important to say that I compare this to a chocolate lava cake. It's a 3/4 baked, right? It's 3/4 baked, but everybody can bring some of their own, twist.
I think Renee's hungry.
That's right.
She's talking about pies and cakes.
Pies and cakes, and notice it's all sweet. So this, if you stripped it down to the simplest, most concrete example you could do, our website is going to be redesigned to better fit, but some of the elements that we've added to the, to date, for example, we've put a resource page, because we do research all the time for our stories, and we discover better, good places to find resources and all this, and we've put some examples of how we can help, through something as simple as a website. It's the oldest thing, well, maybe not the oldest thing in the world, but it's an old technology, it's an old tool, but it still works. It's still a really, really important tool,
Yeah.
and then, but it's a good example of, people could bring to us a bunch of resource information, and that, we can build events.
And the way it's set up now, it's like you can pick and choose your location if you want a federal or provincial.
Yeah.
Program.
We've put some examples.
I think,
We've put some examples
that's
where we
just a
started right at the, the global level with the United Nations Environment. I think we put this one was on the health research.
But that's
And,
just like one example of what
Absolutely.
what more
And you also mentioned events. Why don't you, sort of say how that could help?
Yeah, like we have an events page, and I mean, right now it's limited to our events and possibly partnerships
events.
and member events where we usually take part in those as well. But how many events do you see going through different means, different pages on Facebook, and you only see them after they're done? So, and you say, oh, I wish I would have known.
Yeah.
But, and there's also, as I believe I mentioned before, you have 2-3 events, 2-3 markets on the same day. Well, had they known, maybe they would have waited,
Yeah, or maybe we would have done it together, or a collaborative event and that sort of thing, for sure.
So having a one place where all events, and I know there's a lot of different places where you can go look for events right now.
Yeah.
But if we could come together as a community and make sure that all the events are centrally located, that would benefit the community.
And that the information is managed, like all of the people who are putting countless volunteer hours or paid hours to try and manage the events information and all of that, so right now this is just scratches scratches the surface, but it's an example of what things could be. And the same thing with the services. Obviously we have our services there, but if we could list the services in the region, that are, sort of the information is organized. So, and that also.
And it's clear that people don't know where to go look for information. If you just look at some of the community pages on Facebook, it's Family Day. What's happening this week today for Family Day?
Yeah.
People don't know, so we want to make sure. That's just an example, but it's a great example to say, well, obviously the communication's not being done properly.
Absolutely. And then, this is, as I said, this is just, this is the screen that Linda was talking about, so it's like, it's sort of, you can sort of open it up to the level that you want, sort of thing, so. Now, in terms of where, I think I've already touched on the fact that we are physically located in the town of Rockland, in Clarence, Rockland, Ontario, which is in Prescott Russell, which is in Eastern Ontario, which is part of Southern Ontario. So, but eventually what we hope is that we have partners all over the region so that we can cover, the wide spectrum, but virtually there is no boundary, and that's really, it's overwhelming, but it's extraordinary at the same time, because it makes, it says, that old saying, it takes 100 ideas to make a good idea, so what if we could bring our, we often say TVC22 is your community voice, but if we don't hear enough of the problem, of the people, we can't really give as much as we could.
Exactly.
Because the tools are there. I'm going to sort of keep this one really, really simple, but essentially it's, a living lab. Again, I go back to, the difference between living labs and prototypes and hubs and all that stuff. The living lab is the sweet spot of open innovation. It's a platform. We're focused, because of where we're located, we're focused on rural living labs. We have a very large agricultural community. We have a very large Franco-Ontarian community. More and more Indigenous group coming on board. A huge inflow of brown, black, new Canadians coming, because there's a lot of French in this area, so they're coming here. It's more affordable, so we're focused on that open innovation platform, and we're trying to reach the sweet spot between testing and design. We're not a design firm. We work with design people in terms of information design, in terms of AI, all that stuff. You know, hopefully by 2030 we'll reach a high level of maturity. And also, but we're just right now, we're just at the early stages, you know, so it's still, we explained as the low maturity, the websites, for example, you know, so that's pretty basic, but it just sort of says we've made the first steps.
Yeah, and I think we talked about our website, but our website is not gonna be the living lab per se, right?
No.
So-
No, right now it just has a page.
Exactly.
And you know, the people who will engage, who will be part of the design will determine, you know, is the Living Lab one website central? Like how is that? And sort of speaks to that, as a matter of fact, you know, this slide is really, really important because it just, like, I'll just kind of go through it. VPC, by the way, is Virtual Private Clouds. That's what it stands for.
Okay.
And, you know, so there's a research center there, and there's a bunch of clouds, and there's a cloud for a company, and a cloud for a university, and, you know, then there's the Living Lab clients, and, you know, you see the different communities. So this is a cluster of industry research entities. We're not there. We're here, we're just entering, you know, we're just entering, but if people come with us, if people come along for the ride, I will say, you know, they will be able to tell us what they want, you know. Do they just want to hover around the centers? But I suspect that some will want to go into the industrial, institutional, public sectors, you know, the social communities, you know, so people will tell us.
Well, we already have a few from the schools and
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's good.
Yeah, so, you know, it's an overwhelming slide when you first look at it, but it makes so much sense, you know, and, you know, you've just got, you know, 4 little dots that are interconnected here, but those 4 little dots is how we start, you know, they're the nodules, if you will, you know, of the network, right? So, now how can seem overwhelming, but it's an integrated design process, and, you know, how we're going to develop this platform. Well, you know, the easier part is probably developing the community in-memory database. You know, you start small and you build with your first few partners, and you know, you work together collectively to build that community for cooperative advantages, you know, for sustainable, continued, integrated learning, product, services, research and development, developing, and then the more complicated side is when you get to the big systems, you know, so how do we solve the information overload, disinformation, misinformation, information management? You know, those are systems, they're systematic problems. So, you know, but if we can't, you know, we have to figure out this part first, and then so that we can build, you know, the bigger part.
Yeah.
And that has to be cross-sectorial as well. And then, by the way, this is Franglish. This is habilité in French, but the habilité in French has H, and it's abilities. So it's a French. Anyways, it's all about regional organization. So sorry about the typo there. It's all about regional organization and developing a management and support platform so that we optimize our results. You know, so, you know, on the one side we have, you know,
and resources too.
Yeah, absolutely. On the one side we have all the abilities and capacities, and then on the other side we have assets and resources, you know, but we need the data we need that information. Where are all the assets in our region?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, it's first finding that information. Then community infrastructure, I'm just going to go quickly to the next one, but at the end of the day, we're starting with a platform of technology, information, communication, infrastructure. If we don't have an infrastructure, and that's often what you'll see from people, they'll say, we don't have the infrastructure to manage this. We don't have the infrastructure to grow and develop ourselves, you know, and you know, at the end of the day, what they mean is, I don't have the tools, you know, to do this. And so, there was a professor at the University of Toronto who talked about, you know, the infrastructure of media as a right to know and tell your stories. And I thought that was pretty powerful. So, and I love this one because the source of this image is the Urban Living Lab framework, and that was out of the United Nations group of Living Lab people. And yeah, you know, you need a really solid governance of management, politics, policymakers, you know. Obviously you need the financing, and I think I'm going to take advantage right here to, you know, thank Desjardins for,
Yes.
you know, a $10,000 contribution to really give us confidence in, you know, that was, it's fantastic to have them, and the reason they joined was because they believe in the work that we're doing with youth, and that was very aligned with one of their priorities. They have many, but they were particularly fond of the work that we're doing with youth, and we're really proud of that as well. But also the consortium, you know, through Heritage, it's a Heritage Canada, and it's managed, the fund is managed by the Media Consortium for minority, or official language in minority situation, but it's to strategic media fund. And you know, so in our case, we're French. We're bilingual, but we're primarily French in Ontario, which is more English. And so, you know, the financing, you know, is massive, and right now we're so excited because we're able to start that infrastructure with a significant grant of $65,000, and that's going to really help us.
It helps with the
You know,
kickoff.
it's a massive kick for the kickoff.
To get going, get moving.
The urban context, well, you know, for us, urban means, you know, the towns of the region, but it's peri-urban, you know, we're not, you know, big urban, we're not small, you know. But in real life, it's happening in real life setting. Everything that we're doing is in real life setting, in cities, in nonprofits, you know, so that's the innovation. It's a natural base, you know, really organic thinking, system base thinking. The partners, we talked about the quadruple helix, people, private, or public, private, people partnership. You know, there's a quadruple. The methods approach is open. But then there's a tiny little piece here that seems so insignificant when you look at everything else, which is the information communication technology infrastructure. But I always say, imagine this as being the roof of a house. If you didn't have this, you know, how water damaged everything else would get,
Exactly,
right?
great analogy.
You know, so I love this, and you know, the United Nations says for sustainable development, information and communication technologies are vital in driving progress towards achieving each and every one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I've been working on sustainable development for decades now, and I absolutely believe this. In fact, I used to do a lot of conferences, and I'd always come back and say, every single one of them would say, you know, we need better information, we need, you know, it always came back to information, communication, and education. which is why we're integrating that element.
And then Renee, if you wanna go
Yeah.
back for a sec, I believe you're saying all these can be done simultaneously, but if you don't have that infrastructure in place, it doesn't hold
Yeah.
things together,
Yeah,
it kinda
you know,
holds everything together.
Imagine if you're trying to do financing without information communication technology. Like, none of it works without that element. It's what sort of closes everything up, seals everything up. So, and that just sort of explains the difference between the original approach, which is supplier based, whereas in the 4P model, the
focus switches.
The focus switches, where in the P3 it's homogeneous. I can't say it.
Don't ask me.
But what that means is, okay, so let's say we're building a hospital, so we talk to doctors, we talk to nurses, we talk to the building people, we talk to, but we don't talk to the community.
Yeah,
Okay?
exactly.
Whereas, a 4P has all of the local action groups, all of the, the cultures, all of the, involved in not only, the design, but also in the operations, where people want to be volunteer, they want to be part of the operation because they were part of it at the beginning, and they want to be part of the whole process. And that's the big difference with,
And they may have a bigger stake.
absolutely,
So it's beneficial for them.
So this is based on community service. This is based on purchase provider. So this is buy and sell. This is community. So that's the big difference. Somebody asks us, do we keep it as and it's a common discussion, and long term we'll have the discussion about, we're starting it as an initiative, as part of our nonprofit, but, will we eventually make it a co-op? We're not sure, but we certainly can operate it like a co-op. In other words, those that are involved, if you put some skin in the game, you get something back, so we could certainly operate it, and there's committees, like it needs committees, because our board, couldn't handle the management of this whole thing.
No, but right now we're just looking at the initial phases,
We're
so we're not there yet.
Yeah, no,
Those
for sure.
decisions are
No.
not being made anytime soon.
Not anytime soon, but it's a question that comes up often, and so I do, I always say, sometimes it's just a name, potato sort of thing, but if we operated with the mindset of a co-op, which is, cooperative,
Well, it's
then,
not a lie.
exactly. So anyway, there's, in terms of financing, there's all kinds of ways to do this, and there's a lot more information, and I think we're going to sort of take a break here. So we don't want to do information overload.
No.
So, but just to say that we have a lean model, which is a lean canvas is essentially a one-page summary of a business plan, but it's a living document. Okay, so as we work with the financing groups, as we work with the first few partners, as we work with the communities, this model will evolve. This one is a bit older, but it keeps, it's still pretty solid in terms of what it was, but you could certainly have input into that. So that's a lot of information.
It is a lot of information.
And but we want to hold workshops, and I would say we're going to post this on our website. We're going to post this presentation on our website, but what would be even better is if you could invite us to go and present to your organizations, your member, your association, your community, and then we could hear from you what you think and what your priorities will be, because, you know, we have consulted with a lot of people, and we think we have a good sense of what people want. We certainly know what we need,
Yeah,
you know, out of it, and, you know, but if
but
we-
just because we need it doesn't mean,
No, exactly.
you know, we cover everybody else.
Well, exactly, and if we're looking for partners, then, you know, we want to be a partner, so we want to be a real partner. It has to be a real collaboration, so, I don't know, is there, okay, so we're, I think, we're going to leave it there. It certainly is a lot, and we're continuously talking, we're not just talking now, we're doing projects, we're testing the grounds, we're, you know, but we're open to any comments, suggestion. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, we want to, you know, make sure that we don't waste any money. If there's, the tools are there, you know, but we're certainly going to work with specialists. We already have gone through a long process, and we are going to start actually putting true action in April. It's the first phase is going to be an 8 months process, so that's you know, going to be our major step. You know, so we're stepping out of our comfort zone now. So
Tony, if somebody wanted to invite you or has questions, how should they contact you?
So, as always, info@tvc22.ca. Our website has a Living Lab page. It's www.tvc22.ca. You can call us at 613-446-6037. I don't call myself. I'm more used to my cell phone. And social media, of course, yes. And actually, there's a really good example. I'm going to just kind of say why, an example why this is important. Social media. In Canada, with, you know, Meta blocks a lot of media groups. And now they're starting to block any group that puts any news on Facebook, and you know, so you want to sort of put that liability and stay, you know, Facebook and Instagram. Meta completely has control over you, over all of your media, you know, so we're talking about taking control back. And so our social media, we have YouTube is a really good page for us. You can see some, actually this recording will stay on our YouTube page. So you could share it, you could subscribe it. That's another way you can help, is subscribe and help us build this momentum. So on that, thank you for making this so much more easy when it's a shared presentation.
You're welcome.
Thanks, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Puis là, il est quelle heure?
7 heures. 7 heures, right.
OK, ben c'est-tu quoi? C'est pas si pire parce que